first time ever.
Hear you loud and clearly.
And it was going place.
That stuff's great.
But the game is not a roguelike.
Boomer shooter.
Bang.
Hello, this is John St. John, and you're listening to KWEP In the Keep, bringing you all the hits from the finest in the world of gaming and entertainment. Now sit back and relax as the drowned god Cthulhu lulls your mind with the tastiest talk in town.
Welcome to another chapter of In the Keep podcast. I'm your very own prophet of the drowned god, the Motherlode. The Keep is a collective of gaming enthusiasts compelled by the drowned god Cthulhu to frag and jib one another into oblivion for all eternity. Alright, we are here with Mr. Mike from RetroMania Wrestling, and it is really great to finally get the chance to talk to you, man. How's it going?
Great, Ty. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So the main thing that I really want to dig into is obviously the game you're making, but before we get to that, I need to preface this conversation with a few things. Fans of the show already know this, but I am deeply, deeply into pro wrestling. When I was from 17 to 21, I pursued a career in it, and it never went anywhere. You know, it was just very isolated to like my area of the Southeast, but it's something that I really, really love, and it's very ingrained in my heart. And with that said, Mr. Hughes is now slotted to be on the roster of the game. So I wanted to tell you briefly a story about when I turned 18. I decided, okay, I'm not going to go to my graduation from high school. I'm going to go to Atlanta and train with Mr. Hughes. And he does like a week-long wrestling camp up there. And that was my first real experience in a wrestling ring. And he is a very intimidating man.
Absolutely.
It's so cool. Who are you've obviously interacted with a lot of different people. So what's been the journey of getting this thing together with all the different wrestlers?
Yeah, I mean, initially, when I started this, it's probably over 2 years ago now, the idea was I was going to take YouTubers and make basically a remake of WrestleFest, which was my favorite game growing up, and still to this day is my favorite game that I ever played. I played it since I found emulators in 1998. I started playing it again at home. So initially, the thought of approaching and talking to pro wrestlers was very intimidating, similar to how you first met Mr. Hughes. So I decided I would go the YouTube wrestler route, and I've been watching since YouTube started these retro gaming channels. Some of my favorites are depicted in the game, but I was going to have them as the primary wrestlers initially, just because I didn't know how to contact pro wrestlers. Eventually, I was like, well, let me see if I can get a hold of the Road Warrior Animal. So I started looking online. I got bounced around to a couple different bookers who said they knew him and could speak for him and do a deal. After going through about 3 or 4 of them, I finally got somebody who actually got Animal to respond, and I was able to sign Animal and Hawk. And from there, I was like, all right, if I can get probably the most recognizable tag team in the history of wrestling in my game, I can get anybody. You know what I mean? So that really gave me confidence to start pursuing other people as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got an amazing roster right now, and I actually enjoy the fact that it's mostly, I mean, Hawk and Animal are obviously legendary,
right,
but the indie kind of guys that are in this, because I mean, we all know that the people that are on TV and shit, but like the people that are like actually out there grinding, like you got Saber Jr., you got Colt Cabana, you got Jeff Cobb. Like this is such an amazing opportunity, not just for you, but I mean, like for them, they're like, hey, I'm in a video game. Like this kind of not legitimizes their career by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, but I
it's
think
so cool.
Yeah, for them, I think there was a coolness factor where a bunch of those guys, like the guys you just said, had never been in a video game before. Not all of them. I think Zach was in Fire Pro, but like Jeff, this is his first appearance, and Colt Cabana. As surprised as I was to find that out, it was his first appearance in a video game as well. And yeah, we wanted to, I went so many different directions when I was initially planning the roster out. And I like personally all eras of wrestling. I mean, some eras were stronger than others. We can admit that. But each era had its highlights for me. So I really wanted to take that and pull guys from each era of wrestling. And the other thing is, going forward, hopefully the game's a huge success and we can keep adding more DLC to it. You never know who we're going to announce now for DLC. Like Mr. Hughes, I think, was out of left field for a lot of people. Like, wow, Mr. Hughes, you know what I mean? It's like, who won't these guys go after to get? So, and I think we're trying to mix not just like for Mr. Hughes in particular, though, him in a suit wrestling in sunglasses. It's just different. You know what I mean? You don't see that a lot. And that's what we're trying to go for as well.
I love the fact that the timeline, especially in the story mode, has no basis in reality. It's such a it's a acid dream fantasy.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, so I get to be Johnny Retro, if I'm not mistaken, is essentially John Morrison.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I get to be John Morrison fighting the Russian Nightmare, and
right?
the Blue Meanie, and like this is absolutely fantastic. I wanted to get your perspective on, like, you get to book your own story. Essentially, you get to live out your wrestling fantasy through making this game.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's obviously convoluted and hilarious because you can make different decisions. So like, all right, I'm just going to go heel the whole way. That's the way I played it the first time. And I mean, so that kind of jumbles up sort of the predetermined storyline as you go through the rest of the story. And then, you build up this huge rivalry with Zack Saber Jr. And then I can just be like, yeah, I'm just going to tag team.
Right.
Fuck it.
Well, we wanted to give the choice up to the player, and you know what? I've seen booking done that way. You know what I mean? Everybody's seen that stuff, so you never know. That's the kind of crazy thing that I think draws wrestling fans to wrestling. Me being one of them. Is just like, it's great when you don't know what to expect. You know what I mean? And that's what I always loved. Like, at least I always loved the surprise entrance and, the run-ins that you weren't expecting and stuff like that. So, yeah, our story goes all over the place, and we have 2 more chapters. We have a to be continued at the end because we were just taking too long to develop the game. We already wrote chapters 4 and 5, so they're going to be coming out as a free update to the game as well. So I think the story's gone over really well. People seem to really enjoy it.
I definitely agree. Like, it's nothing but pure fun so far, and I can't wait to play the rest of it. And I can't wait to see, because you said earlier, now that you've got a published game, like when you were just approaching people beforehand, like, hey, you want to be in this weird game thing? Like, maybe let's see how they feel. But now that it's like out there, oh, well, I get to be in the same game that all these other people are in.
Right.
So it's going to be really interesting to see it play out. Now, do you have, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's funny because we were chasing everybody before. Now we're getting some attention now where people are approaching us. Hey, I would love to. You ever think of including me in the game? So we're definitely getting that. And I think that's just goes to show, like, Colt Cabana, Matt Cardona have streamed the game and really gotten a great reaction from people and their fans from it. So kind of word of mouth carries. And then, like Tommy Dreamer, Nick Aldis have all been tweeting that out, because look, they'll pimp themselves out to the nth degree because they're in it. So you know what I mean? They'll show anything I send them that has them in it. They'll tweet it out. They'll put it on Facebook. They'll do whatever. Yeah,
Colt has always been excellent.
He's awesome.
He's like the prime example of an independent wrestler who knows how to promote himself.
Absolutely.
I mean, part of the reason why I'm sitting here doing a podcast is because of him. Like, I was addicted to the art of wrestling forever. I mean, that's what got me like, I'm going to go be a wrestler. Fuck it. Right. I'm going to try everything. Live your dreams. And he's easily one of my favorites of all time for that reason.
Yep.
And also because he's, the comedy genius.
Yeah, he's real. I really enjoy him. I really do.
And you've gotten a lot of really good talent. We already kind of talked about the way that, these are wrestlers that are not like worldwide TV famous necessarily. I mean, you got Tommy Dreamer, you've got all those guys, but WARHORSE was an excellent addition to the roster. He won the first, what you're calling Indie Mania, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. So we ran a contest. I can't believe it's like a year ago now at this point, but, we ran over a year ago. We ran a contest we called it Indie Mania, and we decided we were originally it was gonna be 64, but it was hard enough getting tracking down 32 guys to sign contracts to be in this, because my lawyer's like, you got to get them to sign off ahead of time and all this other stuff. But We got 32 independent wrestlers that we solicited from our social media followers to give us names, and whoever kind of got the highest number of votes, we put them in this tournament. And WARHORSE I had never heard of before, so this was as much for me to get to know people as well, because I'm a lot of the guys I'd never heard of before. But the guy who helps me with my social media is huge into indie independent wrestling, so he knew almost everybody. But we got him in here, and we had the guys do promos, and the fans would vote to see who moved on to the next round. So I think at a minimum, it was great exposure for them even to be in this, because, we were growing our follower base, but, anything helps to get your name out there. And WARHORSE kind of just came out of nowhere, and his promos were great, and he just did such a phenomenal job and ended up winning it.
You really go the extra mile doing, as you said, you never even heard of him before, but like the showmanship in the game, it's in a retro game. It's very subtle, but like WARHORSE doing his like headbang taunt and everything. And even the introduction, which I'm sure a lot of people kind of skip over, but you get the following will be in all capitals. Like, And so how much research are you doing day to day, like trying to get all those little details in place?
Yeah, we definitely, once they were in the game, so our roster, one of the knocks is our roster isn't huge yet. So we have 16 guys, but we wanted to make sure we really capture everything. And WARHORSE sends me this pencil drawn sketch. Hey, you think you could do this stage in the game? And it was what became our hell stage. And it's pretty much dead on to what he envisioned it to be. And I'll tell you, we've gotten one of the greatest reactions from that stage. And that's one of the things I think that sets us all, apart from the other wrestling games, is we're doing stuff like we have zombies in our hell audience. You know what I mean? We're trying to have fun and make it fun, because that's why we all watch pro wrestling, is to be entertained. We tried to really go away from the sim route as much as possible and really get back to the arcade roots that we all played, for people my age at least, but for, in the arcades, the original wrestling games where the matches weren't super long. You could get in, the controls were pretty simple to pick up, and just go in and have a fun game. And that's what we really tried to capture.
Yeah. And in my circles, I've been talking a lot about the game, and one of the main takeaways is like, oh, is this going to be like Fire Pro? And I'm like, no, because Fire Pro is it's like a wrestling game for really technical people who really want to get into every little detail of it. And RetroMania, if I'm not just missing something here, is essentially like a 6-stick arcade game, or a 6-button arcade game. You could play it on a fighting stick, and it's so much more fun that way. And I've had so many conversations with people about like, well, the reason why like 2K sucks is because it loses that element that we wanted when we, you mentioned you were a kid playing arcade games. I mean, my era was, No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000. Like, these are really fun.
The heyday. That was the heyday too. Yeah, for sure.
And Shut Your Mouth even was really fun. And that just gets lost in this, constant attack on like, let's try to be really realistic. I'm like, wrestling was never realistic in the first place.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what we're really trying to make the game fun. Like, every decision we made was to make it fun. Mm-hmm. And we're all automatically going to get the comparisons to Fire Pro just because we're a 2D wrestling game, and that's really the only other 2D wrestling game out there. So we're immediately going to get comparisons to it, and we wanted to stand apart from Fire Pro. And don't get me wrong, I love Fire Pro. I've played it. I've been playing it since 6-Man Scramble on the Sega Saturn when I imported it in, and I couldn't even read Japanese, but I figured it out, how to do everything, printing translation. So I'm definitely not knocking Fire Pro, but I didn't want to make Fire Pro. They did a really good job on their game. I wanted to make an arcade game, and I think we did a really good job in that.
Yeah, one of my good friends, I was just talking to him right before this interview started, and I was saying how, like, the difference between this and Fire Pro, and his response was like, okay, so Fire Pro is like Skate, and RetroMania is like Tony Hawk, where it's not based in reality. It's just fucking fun. Like, that's the whole point. Yeah, I love it, dude. I really as soon as it came out, I think I got off work that morning and just sat down and played it 100% all the way through.
Wow, so you played it when it was the hard version.
Yeah. I haven't, since you've updated it with all the different stuff, I haven't really gotten a chance to sit back down. So what have you done since release to change things? Yeah,
so we had the only real criticism we had out of the gate was it was difficult, that it was too difficult. And I think part of that was on us because we had the same beta testers basically from probably about halfway through development to the end of development, and they got good at the game. And we thought it was too easy, so we almost ramped up the difficulty too much, and we just kind of, all right, this is perfect, And it was tough for people, and especially if you never played Fire Pro before, because we do have a timing-based grapple system. It's not all timing. We definitely had our button mashing moments as well, but it is a timing-based one. So there is a learning curve for that. So what we did is we dialed down the difficulty only on the first 2 difficulty levels. So for those of you wanting a challenge, you can still crank it up and get the same difficulty as you did before. But the bigger thing we did is we added what we call the grapple assist, which kind of has visual feedback if you press a button too early, too late. So it's similar to, I would compare it to like the shot meter in like NBA 2K, where it'll tell you too early, too late on your release of your shot, something like that. So once we made those 2 changes within like 3 days of launching, the difficulty all went away. And then now everyone's just, really getting great. Now we're getting just nothing but great feedback on the game.
I mean, that's an interesting take on it. And I could definitely see how a lot of people would respond that way. I never thought the game is too hard. I just thought that, okay, I didn't get it quite enough tutorial before I got into the meat of it. So, I mean, you get the first little thing where, all right, you're in the gym and all right, so here's like the basic stuff: run, tackle, grapple. All right, move on with your life. And it didn't really explain how the what are you calling it? The charisma system or the height meter?
Just taunt. Okay. Yeah, you're taunting and how that helps your momentum. The momentum bar is what we call it. Yeah.
The biggest thing that got me, which was I lost several matches in a row because I would get tossed out of the ring and I was not taught how to get back in the ring. I figured out eventually, like double tap.
So we put that on the controls. If you pause it and go to controls, it says it there too. But those things, I think I think that was like we took for granted stuff that we put on so early that we just to us it was natural. And granted, this is my first time through development. Although we have seasoned people, but I think it would have helped if we would have gotten some new beta testers on. I think we could have flushed that out a little bit better. So those are the types of changes we're making now for new users, because we do want to appeal to not just hardcore wrestling fans, but just casual people who want to jump in, because it's a great casual game to play, especially if you get multiplayer going locally. We can play up to 8 people on certain systems. I think once hopefully the country starts opening back up again, or the world starts opening back up again, we'll see a lot more of that as well.
I know this is kind of far off, but do you envision there being online multiplayer at some point?
Yeah, so we actually started early on. It was a plan to include it from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So we did lay some groundwork, but we were having all kinds of like lag issues and things like that. And I did a lot of research on this, and a lot of games, their launch was killed because of bad online multiplayer. Yeah. So I thought, well, let's do it right and not rush it. Because we're a really small team, and we were already taking a lot more. We bit off more than we could chew to begin with, because there's a reason there aren't a lot of wrestling games, especially as of late. They're difficult to make. It's like, I remember my lead programmer, just to emphasize that point, my lead programmer was not a wrestling fan. So when I told him just a simple mechanic of an Irish whip, you're going to throw him into the ropes and he's going to come back at you, and he's like, well, why would I just keep running into the ropes? Well, it's like, why wouldn't I just stop? Or why wouldn't I just grab the ropes? And I'm like, yeah, I had to explain wrestling to him. You know what I mean? So there's some mechanics that are really specific to wrestling games that you really don't see in any other games. So, that was part of it as well. But so we definitely, to answer your question directly, once we get through launch, we're going to circle back to online multiplayer and see what it's going to take to do it right.
In response to that, I will say, and I'm sure Mr. Hughes will never remember me for the rest of my life, but he taught me this lesson that you think, oh, why wouldn't I just stop? You can't. You're not stopping. When somebody like a big man fucking throws you like that, dude, you turn around and you hit that rope because it's the only saving grace you have. And if you got to take a clothesline on the other end of it, all you're worried about is not dying when you hit those ropes.
No, I completely agree with that. Yeah. But I think the casual, like the non-wrestling fan, is the one that has the hard time grasping that concept.
Tell him to get in the ring. We'll show him.
Well, it's funny. I got in the ring once recently right before everything happened. The first time I was ever inside a wrestling ring. Tommy Dreamer invited me to the Philadelphia Comic Con. The House of
Wow.
Hardcore was running some shows there. So he said, why don't you come down? We have some extra space. You can demo the game. And then so I got in and I got a picture in there. And I went to get in the ring, and I almost tripped getting into the ring. And I didn't see Tommy's face, but I'm pretty sure he just rolled his eyes and kind of shook his head. Because I got my first leg in, and I just tried to do it how I've seen it on TV a million times. And when I pulled my second leg in, it just kind of clipped the rope, and I almost wiped out. Luckily, I didn't, though, but it was embarrassing nonetheless.
There is a finesse to it. I mean,
Yeah.
they make it look so that's the
Oh, I
magic of
know.
wrestling. They make it look
Yeah.
so easy on television, and the reality is that nothing about it is easy.
For sure.
So that must have been a really fun experience. I mean, you don't necessarily get to go to a bunch of conventions all the time right now, anyway, in the climate we're
Yeah.
in, but especially demoing, like, okay, so let's say you went to PAX or whatever, that would make sense. But, you know, you're going to like a Comic-Con where they're showing a wrestling show to show a game about
Right.
wrestling. That must have been a really interesting experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically I got in for nothing, you know what I mean? So it was just my time. I took my oldest son down there to help me.
Mhm.
And, you know, they were drawing wrestling fans over there. So we got a lot of good publicity about it. And, you know, we'll take any publicity we can get. We're not super huge. We're growing. And I think word is going to start spreading. You know, our Steam reviews have been really solid, very positive rating on Steam. So I think the word is going. But we're trying to spread the word. Because really, I want to make money, but I want to reinvest because there's still a lot of stuff. This is a passion project for me. And I really want to add more features to this that I had to scrap because we didn't have time to put everything in. So
you mentioned that this was kind of your first dive into making a game commercially and everything. So what was your background before that?
So I have a background in software engineering, but it's all finance and accounting software. So as sexy as that job is, and as entertaining as accounting and finance software is, I decided, you know, I wanted a little more out of my software engineering background. So that's when I dove into game development. So I had done when I got my master's, I actually wrote a small game. Or actually didn't even write it. I modified game code for a program. And you know, that's as much as I've done outside of like just dabbling here and there. So I knew when I got serious, I needed to hire lead programmers, you know, so my background was project management now. So I was able to do that. But the problem is I still had a big learning curve because I can manage finance and accounting projects because I know them very well. I've been doing it for 20 years, but I'd never made a game before. So the business side of it, I was fine with, but even like estimating how long things were going to take, you know, and hence the delays we had with releasing the game, and then the whole world situation didn't help matters. And I wouldn't say that was the major reason we delayed. It was definitely more of my inexperience personally than the world climate, because we were all remote anyway. We don't have an office, but it definitely didn't help matters. So
yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time obviously talking to indie game developers, and you mentioned earlier, like, just your beta testers were so used to the game by the time it comes out, it's like, okay, it's a bit too difficult for the normal person. I mean, I had a really good conversation recently with a guy named Christus who's making a game called Doombringer, and so his background was like, he'd been a modder for Doom forever. I mean, he's a professional Doom player if anyone ever was. And, you know, I play it and I'm like, this game is kind of super difficult, man. And, and I mean, like, normal should be normal, right? Like it should be like anybody could feasibly jump into this without really being an experienced shooter player, or in your case, an experienced fighting game player. And you take it a step further, because even if you're really good at Tekken, you're not necessarily going to understand the mechanics of a wrestling game. So I totally understand that. And that's just one small aspect of a huge plethora of issues that can come through when you're developing any kind of game. Yeah. So what has it been like managing the team though?
Yeah, so it's been I've got lucky because the guys that all work with me are phenomenal. They're great to work with. The challenging part is we're all in, well, not all of us, but most of us are in different time zones. And when I mean different, I mean like my lead programmer's in Vietnam. He's actually from California, but he lives in Vietnam now. And so he's, 12 hours difference. So we either meet late at night or early in the morning. but he's been awesome. And I think the hardest part was managing the art, because we got a lot of contractors for art and keeping everything in line, and the number of the art assets we have for this game. That was something I didn't really. I knew it was going to be a lot, but we're talking like 1,000 individual sprites for each character. So it's like 16,000 sprites are in the game, and on top of that, the story artwork and the environmental artwork and everything else. So I think I probably compartmentalized it too much, where we probably would have saved some time if they would have been talking to each other directly. And I don't know if it's me micromanaging and just it's hard to let go of your baby. You know what I mean? So I really wanted input on everything. And it's not that I didn't trust them to do it right, but I had a very specific vision that I wanted executed a certain way. And I'm sure, I probably annoyed all of them at one point or another. But they were all great. They didn't tell me that, at least, and they're all great to work with, and they're still helping us get us over the finish line now. So
it's really, really cool. The whole, I love the fact that indie gamers or indie developers are thriving in this climate right now, because a lot of, major studios were, oh crap, we can't go into the office. What are we going to do? How do we do this? But you're already, as just a part of what you're doing, managing people all across the globe. So that was never going to be a major transition for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it worked out well in that regard. We definitely, everybody was kind of preoccupied. That was our biggest issue, right? So when everything started happening, our productivity definitely dropped until people got used to our new normal, I want to say. Yeah. It took a couple months though, because everybody had family members dealing with it different ways, and all over the country. Like I said, two of our artists were in Spain. So, and they were one of the countries that got hit really hard initially. So, they lost some time there where they were dealing with, their family and things of that nature. And, but it's been really great. Like, and I like working with people from other countries. We definitely have our share of US based people too. Our environmental artist is down in North Carolina. Our art director was in California. And then we have a couple people in Canada, but the cool thing was we had people. I had an artist in New Zealand, Spain. I'd mentioned Italy, Canada, Brazil, Argentina. We have people all over the world helping us out. India, Indonesia. So it was really cool interacting with people from other cultures as well.
That's definitely been my experience, just talking to people, because I never know. Like, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna check out who made that game, and then I'm like, okay, so Quick Tequila made that game. He's such a great dude. He lives originally in India, so I'm like looking for an Indian guy, but then I find out, okay, he lives in Hong Kong, so I got to track him down there. I'm like, and his game is essentially like very East Asian style game, and I was like, okay, so is this guy like where are you from, dude? And he's just
right.
Like, well,
you don't know. Yeah.
Like, what time zone are you on? And he finally like, oh, I live in Hong Kong now. I'm like, okay, so that explains why your game is so like East Asian themed. But like, so then I messaged him later, because I noticed there's a lot of people in India who listen to the show. And I'm like, can you teach me how to say like, welcome to In the Keep podcast in Hindi? And he's like, I don't even remember how to say it. But by the way, I don't think I just said the name of the game, but Lovely Planet, for anybody listening who wants to check that out. Man. So you mentioned that the artist had to make so many different sprites for each character. And one of the things that really stands out in any wrestling game is, like the move sets of each individual person. And there's always going to be like kind of the stock moves. I mean, if you go back to WrestleMania 2000, you see people doing moves that they would never do in real life, right?
Right.
Man, I don't think he does a pile driver, but that's just the default.
Right.
So what were the challenges in like getting the art for each individual one of those moves and doing your research on each wrestler? Yeah,
I mean, so we hit YouTube up a lot, because like I knew almost everybody for the most part, but like a lot of these guys, like Saber Jr. does a million different things.
Yeah.
So, and he's unique where he has the most submissions in our game. Yeah. So, we had to do research, and we had to get it to the art and the animator. Our lead animator, we had a couple, but the guy who did majority of the work was from Brazil, and he didn't he he didn't know wrestling, so we would take YouTube clips of the guys doing the actual moves, try to get a couple different angles of them, and send them down to them. So it's typically 5 to 6 at least of their 12 grapple moves. And I wouldn't say it's that high. It's at least 4 to 5 of their 12 grapple moves are unique to the wrestler.
Right.
Or would be considered their specialties or their specialty moves, and then their finisher as well. So we definitely wanted to add a lot of variety to it, and I think some of them have a few more than others. And it's probably more so because I was more familiar with their movesets, and like Colt, I knew a lot more of. And it's funny, I think he was playing on stream, going through it, and he's like, "Did you give me the flying asshole?" And then he did it, and he's like, "Yes, you gave it to me." And it's like, it was really cool for me to see him play as himself. And he was annoyed he wasn't wearing his headband coming into the ring. So we our next update, he will have his headband when he walks to the ring.
Good old Cabana-rama.
Yep.
So part of the mechanic of the game is it does kind of limit what different styles of wrestlers could do. So like you mentioned Saber Jr. already. I mean, he's known for being the man of a million submission moves, and it's wildly different than your typical, like, all right, we're going to do collar and elbow tie up,
right,
reach around, Irish whip. Like, you're not doing that with Zach so much. And
we don't have chain wrestling.
Yeah. It's also an issue when you start talking about like high flying wrestlers, because I mean, you do have the top rope moves, but you're not like doing 619s in this game or anything like that. So as you get more people in, are you going to be experimenting more with different mechanics? Or are you trying to just keep it?
No, I think so. We've gotten, like, Johnny Retro was kind of tough. Mm-hmm. He does a lot of those. Like, we have a lot of corkscrew stuff with him. We have the breakdance leg drop with him. So I think it's really going to depend on who we get. Like, we were trying to get Jay Lethal.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out. I don't think Ring of Honor really wanted him doing it. We're going to try to revisit that, because I really wanted to get him, and he was excited to be in the game. And he just said he couldn't do it. So I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't know what the reason was for it, but I think it was something to do with, because he seemed pretty excited to be in the game. But, I was wondering, how am I going to do the lethal injection? Cause that's a tough move to do in the system that we have built. And just to get the timing right and for him to bounce off the ropes, but we're going to come up with solutions. So, so far, the only move that was really tough to do that we ended up not doing, Colt does this move where he'll jump off the top rope and land when the guy moves out of the way, and he'll kind of just bounce and then do a splash on him. And we tried doing that, and we were having a really hard time making it work. So I'm like, all right, well, we have like 5 or 6 other of Colt's moves in. Let's bag that one for now. I think he really wants the Superman pin in there, so I was thinking of a way to add that for him later. So we'll see if we can figure it out. But I would like to figure out, how to do any move in wrestling for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because as a game designer, you're stuck in this sort of, okay, what works for the mechanics of my game versus like what, is going to sell like the coolness of the wrestling part of it, right, and everything. It's going to always kind of be a constant thing. So there will come a point where you have this thing that you would like to have in there, but it just straight up doesn't work for the mechanics of the game, or it, breaks the player's immersion,
right,
or their ability to do it. So you can't just turn around 6 months from now and say like, oh, we've introduced all these new mechanics that have nothing to do with the original gameplay.
Yeah, because we don't want to alienate our existing user base, right? Because we're already starting to grow on Steam, the Steam forums. We have a really good audience there who's given us a lot of great suggestions, and we're not looking to be like, all right, here's a game, see ya. That's not. This is, like I said before, this is my passion. I want to add so many things to this still, and that's not to say we released it without a lot of stuff in it. I think there's a lot of meat and potatoes in the game already, but I think there's just, obviously, the first time out and being a small developer, if we added every feature I wanted to, which is basically any great feature any wrestling game has ever had, we'd have been another 2-3 years of development. So,
yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see what you guys end up doing with the multiplayer. Even if it's in a LAN environment, it's going to be really cool to watch, the communities kind of get together, and then it'll probably cross pollinate with a lot of other fighting game communities. Like, hey, we know there's plenty of places that have like fighting game like community centers, or even just people in their house. But to see what they do with it in terms of, can we have a tournament, and do we have a broadcast and a live stream, or can you get real commentators or real wrestlers to kind of do that stuff for you, which I'm sure you'll be able to. It's going to be really, really fun.
We definitely want to grow this community and see what we can do with it. I think we have a great start because, I always said from the beginning, let's make sure the core game is fun. And once we do that, we can add a lot more bells and whistles to it. But if the game isn't fun and people aren't enjoying it right out of the get-go, it's going to be tough to grow an audience.
Definitely. I mean, pace yourself, man. I'm not going to rush you into online multiplayer.
I hear you.
Get out of here. But I just really can't wait to see what gets done with it, man. It's going to be very exciting to have a wrestling game that is. We already had our comparisons to Fire Pro.
Yep.
Like, that's more casual that anybody can get into. I mean, I'm sick and tired of Super Smash Brothers. I can't take another one. So this is speaking to my heart. Like, I want to be Warhorse and win every match for the rest of all eternity. That's really fun to see the different weird pairings. I mean, I said earlier, like, okay, well, I get to, fight Hawk and Animal. I get to fight with the Russian Nightmare. I get to fight with all these different people. And I am deeply interested to see how are you planning on letting people kind of mess around with the story mode at all, like to create their own kind of roster?
People have brought that up. I think, one of the things we did do is you could technically, on the PC version, we opened those files up. So for creative people, they can already get in there and change the entire story dialogue if they wanted to. But I would like to. One of the things, though, I would love, and we were talking about this early on, it was just like, it could be a game in and of itself, but like create your own story mode almost, and just give assets, because the way we wrote the mode, each wrestler has like a neutral animation, an angry animation, and a happy animation. So, and then we have backgrounds added. So it wouldn't be that difficult to just say, all right, you can select from every wrestler has these 3 animations, write your own story. You're able to make decisions. Now, obviously, we wrote that all in code, so we'd have to do like a user interface to create all that stuff. But I would love to, add that kind of stuff onto this. I think that would just add to the longevity of the game. And that's what we want to do. Like, obviously we're not relying on next gen hardware for a 2D pixel art game. So we already have our art aesthetic that's never going to get any older than it already is. So I just want to keep adding features to it.
That leads us into the obvious, and I'm sure this is in the facts somewhere, but create a wrestler. Is that going to be implemented at some point? Can I make my own guy? Can I choose my own moves?
To be determined, right? So one of the things, in order to do it right, we have to add a ton more animations and a ton more moves. So, this comes down to the business side of it, which is just that costs a lot of money. I mean, Fire Pro has basically used the same moves from their Super Nintendo game and updated them throughout. So they already have all the animations done. I'm sure they've tweaked them, but if you play 6-Man Scramble, you're going to see some of the same animations that are in World. You know what I mean? Right. They're not redoing every animation from scratch each time. So we would have a sizable investment to do something like that, to do it right. But what we may do earlier than that, and I'm not ruling that out, by the way. If we really knock this out of the park, and we just keep, over the next year, we just keep growing our user base and keep having fun with it, we'll definitely look at it. But what I would like to do, there was a game, WCW Wrestling. This is back on the NES. Okay, so it was not a great game by any means, but it was all we had. So there were basically three or four worthwhile games playing on the NES. It was Pro Wrestling, Tecmo World Wrestling, and this WCW. I think we're probably the top 3. All the WWF games were not that good on the NES. But anyway, what they let you do is pick your moves at the beginning for each wrestler. So it didn't really matter who you were. Yeah. I think you could pick what moves you did. So I think what we would like to do is maybe something like, here's a kind of a generic looking wrestler, but you can change his hair, change his tights, a couple other customization features, and you can pick his own move and name him, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. And we try to make the portraits kind of mimic that something. And then so you only be selected from the moves that are currently in the game, but you could pick moves from any of the wrestlers that are in the game. So that's something we're kind of throwing around. I think our main thing right now is let's take in feedback for the next couple of weeks and kind of see where the community is pointing us towards, and then kind of create a roadmap and say, all right, we're going to try to do these features first, then add this, then add this, then add this.
I was going to say that even if it were just limited to the moves that you already have in the game or the characters that are already there, I mean, I'm just going to take WARHORSE's moveset and then add the flying ass as his finisher and we're done. Like that's
because he does rule ass.
That is so. This is an amazing thing. I'm so glad I get the chance to like actually sit down and talk to you about it, because that's one of the coolest things I get to do is like when I play a game that I think is really, really cool, or even in your case, see something that I hope is really cool right there in the future. I mean, it's such a pleasure to get into the heads of people. And with that said, I want to kind of dive a little bit into your background as a wrestling fan. Like, when did you first see wrestling, and what were who were the wrestlers and the organizations that inspired you?
Yeah, so I think I was 6 years old when I first saw wrestling. I was at a friend's house sleeping over. He put on WWF.
Yeah.
So, we saw a little bit of Hulk Hogan and in interviews, because at that time they weren't on really TV. You had to go to the shows to see them. And then the next weekend came around and I was home and I tried to watch it and I couldn't find WWF, but I found wrestling. But it happened to be Jim Crockett Promotions in the NWA.
Yes.
Okay, so then I talked to my friend like the next day on Sunday or later that day on Saturday. He's like, "Hey, did you watch wrestling?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, did you see Junkyard Dog?" I'm like, "No. I saw Magnum TA and Dusty Rhodes though." And they're like, "Who?" I'm like, "What do you mean who? You know what I mean? Did you watch the show?" And then we finally figured out, we were 6. So we finally figured out that there were 2 different promotions. We thought they were different leagues because at the time there was the NFL and the USFL.
Yeah.
So we thought it was something like that or something. It was just a different league. But I grew up and I actually preferred the NWA brand versus the WWF brand at the time. Now, don't get me wrong. I still watch like Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling and cartoons and like that. But I definitely liked the NWA. I liked the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight. Well, I hated the Midnight Express, but I liked them there, the Russians, and I remember seeing Magnum TA win the U.S. title against Wahoo McDaniel.
Mm-hmm.
So, I really loved the NWA, but I eventually just started watching both all the time, and it really grew from there.
The thing that really separated, I mean, obviously you're watching the NWA and the WWF, especially at the time, was, I mean, the NWA was very seriously, like, you could believe it was real. That never for a moment did I think WWE was real. Even as a little boy, I just loved the characters, which is great. That's what they built their brand on, and that's what makes wrestling special. But when you go back, I mean, I've watched Wide World of Sports or whatever on SportsCenter and seen a bunch of those old school matches, even just like the middle card stuff, and you see like young John Layfield. And this looks like these guys are beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
So,
I think they were.
yeah, I believe they actually were. And even like the guys out of Canada, I mean, Chris Benoit, and those dudes up in Calgary, the Harts, and all that stuff.
Stampede Wrestling, yeah.
Wrestling was held to such a high standard of like, you cannot let people know that this is a work. And I really enjoy that era. I enjoy now. I like that everybody's in on the joke and we're having fun with it, but there's something special about that time that just resonates throughout. Because my experience in the Southeast was everybody kind of still has that mindset. Like, even though we're letting them in on the joke, like they all know the kayfabe is kind of like gone of it, but the style of wrestling is still based in that. Like, don't work hard, don't go out there and do a bunch of crazy flips. Just go out there and tell a story.
Right.
And I think that's where NWA really shined especially in that time frame.
Absolutely.
So who were your favorite wrestlers?
So I said Magnum TA was one of my favorites. I like the Road Warriors. I liked the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah.
I like the Fantastic. So another thing I started watching was Bill Watts started the UWF, not the West Coast UWF, which was another one, but this was Bill Watts. So it had Ted DiBiase, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the Freebirds.
Yeah.
And it was short-lived because then they merged with Jim Crockett, and they had like the Terry Taylor and Nikita Koloff were the two U.S. champions, and they had to battle it out. And I think at Starrcade they unified all the belts. But man, so many great matches. And I remember being confused because I remember Jake the Snake Roberts, who was in WWF at the time, wrestled Ric Flair on UWF television, and I had no idea what was going on then. It kind of blew my mind. But I did watch WWF though, so I liked when the Legion of Doom was there. I loved obviously the feud between Hogan and Orndorff. I really liked when Orndorff became friends with him, then he pile drived him in the ring. Bundy, King Kong Bundy, and Big John Studd. Yeah. I remember the Andre the Giant was the super machine coming over. So I loved everything. And WrestleMania 3 was probably the pinnacle. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Macho Man, great match. But the Hogan Andre thing is what sold the show. So
you got to live through the time when the territories were kind of being bought up by the Federation and everything. And so like, I'm assuming at this 6-year-old stage in your life, you just get whatever's broadcasted to your region.
Yep.
They played that way. So were you even aware of like what's going on in Memphis at the time with Lawler and Kaufman and all that?
Nothing. I knew nothing about that. I didn't see Memphis. The only thing I saw some UWF was broadcast at like 11 p.m. at night. I remember begging my parents to let me watch. I was a little older then. I think that was like 85-ish. So I was like 10 then. And then I saw a little bit of World Class with the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. That was like around the same time. That might have been at midnight they showed that. So I watched a little bit of that as well. But outside of those, I didn't know. Then I would buy wrestling magazines. So I would see, some other stuff as well.
Yeah. Man, I got to meet Wildfire Rich one time. And when he was old, I mean, obviously when I met him, and I don't even know if he's still among us, but one of the coolest things about being on the indie circuit was just getting to see all these like kind of legendary guys that were still doing it. Like I saw Bullet Barb Armstrong work probably one of the last matches he ever worked. And even though, they're not like athletic looking dudes anymore, like these guys just had such an amazing understanding of ring psychology and how to really tell that story. So even though they weren't taking bumps, or they could work the younger guys and make them look so good. And
right.
I loved that, man. I really, really loved just seeing all of these legendary guys from that era, like kind of give back to the people now, because for a long time in wrestling, there was this culture of, everything is for me. I'm taking care of me and only me. I'll step on other people's foots. And that is, from what I understand, kind of totally gone away. Like we're seeing it right now with a lot of the guys that you're working with. Is like AEW has been excellent for that. Like let's really have the older talent give back to the new guys and try to build a roster that can be the legends of the future. I mean, MJF is one of those guys. I think Jungle Boy, if he can ever like put on some muscle, will be absolutely fantastic. Right.
But yeah, it's a great time now because I think WWE needed some competition.
Thank God.
Hopefully they can come, step up at some point. But right before the pandemic started, we had NWA had come back, and I was really enjoying NWA Power. Obviously, they're in our game as well, but and Impact, Ring of Honor, MLW. You had a bunch of other organizations that were starting to get some steam behind them. So I'm hoping we can get back to that point really soon.
Yeah, I like that. AEW has kind of tried to give back to the. I wouldn't say NWA is like the smaller indie or anything like that, but I mean, definitely they don't have the television prowess and all that.
Right,
but
absolutely.
Like having Thunder Rosa on competing for the women's title, and doing the cross promotion and everything. I think they did the stunt with Kenny Omega going on. It was Impact.
Yep.
Very interesting stuff going on there. So
it's awesome. And I'm hoping we can get all those guys in our game too.
Yeah. Have you gotten to interact with Billy Corgan at all?
No, not at all.
Oh, damn. That would be so cool, man. What an interesting human being he must be.
Yeah, I know. No, we haven't. We basically, it was the person we dealt with before left, and then we're dealing directly basically with Nick Aldis now.
Yeah. That's, I mean, you're getting to meet all these fucking legendary people, man. I'm so jealous of you.
Yeah, it's been pretty. It's been pretty cool. Like I've gotten to know Stevie Richards pretty well. I consider him a friend now. I talk to him pretty frequently, and Tommy Dreamer as well. He's been great, helping me navigate through everything as well.
Yeah, man. So what's the advice that they've given you?
I mean, just like the first thing is like you're welcome to the crazy world of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Because it's a circus, for sure. But they just, they've given me, they help me identify more of the BS stuff that's around that I wouldn't necessarily see. And I wouldn't say I'm a mark, but I'm definitely a fan. And, which I don't know if there's even any difference. I've definitely gotten to learn some of the terminology though. It's like one of the things I noticed early on is, I don't know if you're pretty young, but the Smurfs, the Smurfs, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right, but everybody called, they said, "Oh, that's Smurfy," or they used the word Smurf interchangeably with basically everything.
Yeah.
That's the way wrestlers use the word gimmick. Everything's a gimmick. This gimmick, that's gimmick. Oh, did you see that gimmick over there? Oh, give me that gimmick. It's like everything's a gimmick. So, learning the wrestling terminology, heat, and not that I wasn't familiar with it, but just they definitely speak almost a different dialect of English, with all the specific wrestling terminology.
Yeah, I mean that is 100% true. I got very confused like the first little while that I was around a lot of people. I mean, do you remember Action Mike Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got to go up to Northern Alabama is where he kind of like ran his show. I'm not sure what he's doing these days. And little shit, like I just bring my friends up there and be like, hey, come watch me wrestle. And, we get there and I've got them in the arena with me before the show starts. And they're like, who are these fucking marks? I'm like, oh, they're my friends. They're cool. They're like, no, get them the fuck out of here. They can't they can't see all these people talking to each other. I'm like, it's 2014, man. Everybody knows.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, I got to work on a show that I think it was the Honky Tonk Man was there and Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Rhythm and Blues reunion.
Yeah. So Greg was like changing in the locker room and he had told somebody like, I'll sign an autograph for your daughter or whatever. Like, that'd be cool. So they just took that as like, oh, I could just walk right in there. So Greg's standing here with his hammer, his legendary hammer hanging out. And this dude walks in with these two like young. I'm like, dude, this is not okay. Get out of here. Man, that was such a cool
That's
experience.
funny.
Do you have any other kind of aspirations or thoughts of, who you would like to see on the roster? I know that it's kind of a weird contracting situation because like Colt, I guess after you guys had already linked up, then signed with AEW.
Right.
So that's not a problem for you guys?
No, we had him first. If anything, it should be a problem for AEW, right? No, but yeah, all of our, that happened with a bunch of our guys, like Chris Bay, who's going to be our first DLC, signed with Impact afterwards. Cardona and Myers are with Impact now. John Morrison's back with WWE. So we had a bunch, we make stars at RetroMania Wrestling. We're the launching pad for a lot of these guys' careers.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people who tune in for the Road Warriors or tune in for a particular indie guy, and then they who's Jeff Cobb? Like, and then they go watch that.
He's one of my favorites.
Like that kind of thing. Yeah,
I love Jeff Cobb's probably my favorite wrestler in the game, just because I love his moves. I love the Tour of the Islands is my favorite move in the game, and it's been awesome.
That must have been a really difficult one to like kind of get right with that.
Yeah, it was. And I needed it. The original WrestleFest had a power slam in it, and it was modeled after Ted DiBiase.
Yeah.
A bunch of different wrestlers did it, but DiBiase had one of the greatest power slams, ever in wrestling. It was just so smooth. And in WrestleFest, they captured it really well. And every time I did it, it felt good. Like, it just felt satisfying to do that move. And I wanted to capture that feeling with Jeff Cobb's Tour of the Islands. And I think we did, because I can do that move over and over again. I love it every time.
So you got the IP to WrestleFest, I assume?
So we have the name, right? Yeah. So that, unfortunately, all the characters in it, though, are all over the place. So There's a shot we could get a couple of them for a future DLC, but most of them are owned by WWE. So,
Yeah.
and they have an exclusive deal with 2K or Take-Two. So, I never say never, but it's doubtful. We'll definitely won't get all the wrestlers. But we have Arc System Works owns the rights to the arcade game WrestleFest.
Yeah.
So that's how we're able to market ourselves as the official sequel to WrestleFest. And we actually have Matt Mania, which was an earlier wrestling game. We have some of their characters depicted in the game as well.
So something that I have to acknowledge here is I see this. People listening won't hear it, but you have a cabinet in the corner back here. So are you going to try to shop that out to the arcades of the world, or?
So that is actually, we did a deal with a company called II Arcade. They are a connected arcade machine manufacturer. So that machine not only plays RetroMania, but there's a store built into it. It's Wi-Fi connected, and you can buy new and old games for that arcade machine. So it's just like another console, like the Switch or the PS4, the Xbox One. It just happens to be an arcade machine. And then part of the deal was I said, hey, you got to give me some free marketing and smack our logo on some of your units. So they did one step better, and they created a limited edition RetroMania arcade cabinet. So it's great publicity for us. As part of the deal, we're on their platform. So anyone who owns an iArcade, because they sell maybe 4 or 5 different models of that unit, not just RetroMania, but they have a whole bunch of different ones. But all of them can play RetroMania. You can buy that game from their store. So I thought it was great. It would be a great marketing for us just to see a RetroMania arcade machine. Now,
is that your preferred method to play the game?
I go back and forth because it's tough because like testing was a pain. Because the default controls on like Switch are different than Xbox and PS4, and then different than the arcade machine. So I've been going back and forth. I do like button smashing on an arcade button. So there's points in time in our game where you have to button smash to win a grapple or something. So it's easier to button smash quickly on an arcade machine for sure.
Yeah, I got to give you props, man, because I'm primarily cover first-person shooters and play on the PC. So I actually tried to play RetroMania with a mouse and keyboard, and I was like, nope, we're going to get a controller.
Yeah, it supports it, but not well. It doesn't play that well. It wasn't meant for that.
It could be done. It's just like not intuitive, and that was like I had to kind of relearn how to use a controller for about 30 minutes there when I started playing the game, because I got through the tutorial. I was like, okay, I'm good. I can handle this, and then it gets like, okay, well now I got to fight who?
Right.
And as you said, it was more difficult at that point. So I'm like, this is not going to work. No, all of this has been really, really cool, man. We're coming up on the hour mark, so I don't want to keep you for too long. To be honest with you, there's a barbed wire death match about to happen on AEW's pay-per-view.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So just for the last 5 minutes here, is there anything that you want to kind of like say to potential people who may want to pick up the game, or even the people who are currently out there trying to get into it?
Yeah, just check us out. RetroManiaWrestling.com has all the details on the game. If you go onto Steam's website and search RetroMania Wrestling, you'll see a lot of great reviews for the game as it stands right now. Mm-hmm. We are like 84% positive ratings. So people are really enjoying the game. We're going to be releasing on consoles. Hopefully in the next week or so, we should be out on all the consoles as well. So Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Few delays getting out to the consoles, but we're almost there. So we'll be available everywhere in the next week or so.
Mike, it's been really, really cool spending some time getting to know you and everything. And as you guys put out updates, I'd love to have you on again, or even other members of the team, to just keep getting updates and keep the fans engaged. It's been really fun.
Would love to. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Alrighty, folks, that wraps it up for this week. Thank you very much to Mike Hermann for making time to be on the show, man. I love talking about wrestling, as you guys know, and that was a really, really cool one. Definitely go pick up RetroMania Wrestling right now on Steam, or whatever platform you end up getting it on. It's absolutely just loads of fun all the way through top to bottom. Also got to shout out my boy Papa Sco. Thank you to him. If you haven't already heard his recent episode on In the Keep, definitely check it out. He's a great guy. He's a great YouTube reviewer, so check out his YouTube channel as well. But I have to say, big thanks to him for pointing me in the direction of RetroMania, which I was not tracking until we had that conversation. Much love to you, brother. I had to pick some music for this thing. We couldn't actually use the RetroMania soundtrack for some various legal reasons I don't understand, so I was like, well, what can we put in here? And I was like, well, let's just use some music from someone else who I know loves wrestling. So this is from the soundtrack to Age of Hell and Bastion of Chaos, created by Primeval, which all of that is my buddy Bridgeburner's project. So definitely, if you're not following that, check it out too. Another big thing to point out: Organ Grinder number 2, April 10th. Be there or be fucking square. Hosted by Tasty Spleen. I plan to be doing commentary again. May have some sketches or something that I do. I'm not sure. I'm just going to show up and go for the ride and see what happens. But Organ Grinder number 1 was so fantastic. If you don't know what the Organ Grinder is, it is this epic. It's not a tournament, so it's a series of exhibition matches across several different arena FPS games, all duels, so 1v1s in Diabolical. The last one we got to see Doom 2 match between Devastation and Hatred. We saw some Doombringer. Quake 4 even made an appearance, which was like, alright, cool, whatever. Had a great time, absolutely enjoyed it. Amazing people working on this stuff, like Boov, OD, obviously Rotten Rose and Jahar, myself, Human Bones. You can't go wrong with this shit, man. So, yeah, April 10th, Organ Grinder number 2, be there, you fucker. Last thing, not going to read off supporters today, but I will say that if you are thinking about becoming a supporter of In the Keep, you should. What you get in return is early episodes, you get access to our exclusive Discord, you get to see who's going to be on the show next, and you get episodes early. And if you donate more than like $25, it doesn't matter, like if you're a Patreon supporter and it's like $5 a month, when you reach $25, I'll mail you a fucking t-shirt because I love you. That's right. I love you. That's it for today. I have some really fucking cool guests for you guys coming up real soon. I can't wait for y'all to see it. Till next time though, just enjoy this music and stay in the keep.